All right, guys. Well, it looks like we've got our participants are here, and I just want to say welcome. We're so excited to be talking to you guys today. Um, I'm thrilled to have Brian Goonan and Shelby Williams, also known as Biscuit Ballerina, with us. Um, just to kick things off, I want to tell you a little bit um, we have some stuff here we need to just kind of, oh, that's not working. Here we go. It's not going perfectly. Okay. It's important for you all to know that this discussion is for educational purposes and is not a medical service. And if you're in need of support, you can find those links and such are on the Minding the Gap website. Please feel free to ask questions in the chat feature or in the Q&A feature. We will do our best to address all the questions, but if there are any relevant questions we cannot answer live, we'll address in a blog following the town hall. Yeah, so I think let's go ahead and see if I can figure this out. Hello, everybody. Hi.
Hi.
It is fantastic to see your faces. Thank you so much for being here today. I want to start by introducing my amazing guests. Well, actually, maybe I should introduce myself first, right?
Right there. It brought this all together.
Yeah, right. I am Kathleen McGuire Gaines. I am a former dancer. I quit dancing because of untreated depression, and that has kind of shaped my life in a really meaningful way. I became a writer for Dance Magazine about 10 years ago, and I've been writing for Dance Point, Dance Teacher, and Dance Spirit ever since, largely on issues related to the mental health of dancers. I founded Minding the Gap in 2018, and we are on a mission to see mental health regarded with the same seriousness as physical health in dance culture. So that's who I am. And I am excited to introduce to you, this is Shelby Williams, who the world knows as Biscuit Ballerina. I first became aware of Shelby, I think the way most of us did, which was with her absolutely fantastically amazing, funny Instagram profile. And was just kind of overjoyed when I learned that, you know, the story behind Biscuit Ballerina is really kind of flying in the face of perfectionism. And I just love the humor you bring to it. So Shelby, why don't you just introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I am originally from Louisiana. I got my professional training at the Washington School of Ballet and Houston Ballet Academy. And that's actually where I met our other guest today, Dr. Brian Goonan. I went to him for some sessions while I was a student. I am kind of a natural perfectionist. I'm very much a type A personality, which can make you thrive in ballet, but it can also make ballet very difficult when you become too self-critical. And I'm sure we'll touch on other things, but basically, like, long story short, how I ended up getting to having Biscuit Ballerina as this big Instagram platform was because as a way to deal with frustration or stress or disappointment, I was always with my friends kind of having a sense of humor about what went wrong. And at the time when I was a student, I didn't realize that it was a coping mechanism. It was just something funny, and it made a situation much lighter when a rehearsal, like I was getting too many corrections, or it was just, I wasn't able to execute something. And I have, like, from the time when I was 15, 16 in the dorms at Houston, videos of me and all my roommates and my best friends from my ballet class that we would make videos together with our shoes, that when we were sewing shoes, because they're so hard, and it's that feeling that I think every ballerina can relate to, of like not being able to articulate your feet, not getting over your shoes. And that for us was just the funniest thing, to do these up close videos of our feet trying to go up on point on shoes that we did absolutely nothing to break them in. And it's just evolved into, I one day, like 2.5 years ago, thought, oh, I'll just share one of them on an Instagram page and dedicate an Instagram page to it, because so many of my friends know me as this person that in rehearsal, if things get too heavy or if it's like a lull in the energy, I would do some little kind of Biscuit Ballerina style dance. And it grew much faster than I thought it would. I definitely thought only my friends would see it. And it came as a shock, but then I kind of quickly realized, because I had to explain what it was, I didn't want people to misinterpret it as making fun of people who had just started approaching dance, and I wanted people to understand that it's something that all dancers, no matter what level you're on with your training and how far you've come with it, it's never good enough because of the nature of ballet. There is no perfection. We always talk about perfect ballerinas, but it doesn't exist. So by having to kind of explain myself, I realized, oh, this is such a nice opportunity to kind of normalize the discussion around the mental health for dancers and hopefully turn it into something more positive than just a comedic Instagram page. So, and now I work in Belgium. I'm a soloist with the Royal Ballet of Flanders.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Shelby. I'm thrilled to have you here. And I definitely, when I first started Minding the Gap, sought Shelby out because I was just like, this is so fantastic, like the approach that you take to all of it. So I really appreciate what you do. You reach a lot of people.
Thank you.
And then our other esteemed guest is Dr. Brian Goonan. And Brian and I first started talking 10 years ago when I was doing my first interviews for Dance Magazine. And you know, I give Brian all the credit in the world for, in a lot of ways, through our interviews, helping me to find my own truth about mental health in dance and my own experience. And then also just kind of making me realize that there are people out there with solutions to this and ideas to make it better. So Brian is one of my advisors for Minding the Gap, and we have presented together at the Performing Arts Medical Association. And I'm just thrilled to have you. So tell us a little bit about you, Brian.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, you know, kind of, you know, I'm a licensed psychologist, and you know, I'm really focused on development of the person, right, of the self, and sometimes ourselves go into things like ballet, and you know, it's really how does the ballet and deciding to pursue a career in dance kind of change and alter that self system, how you see yourself, how the world interacts with you. And it does so in really wonderful ways in some regards, and in really not so wonderful ways in other regards. And the kind of information that we take in about ourselves and the belief that we have about ourselves, you know, Shelby was talking about that perfectionism. We're sometimes getting all those criticisms. What do you do with those? How do you keep them away from that's who I am, and really just leave them as that's a correction that I'm getting about what I'm doing? And that's really, really hard because most people enter the world of ballet, especially folks that are going to be, you know, heading down the professional route. Most people head into the ballet when they're, you know, 12, 13, 14 years old, and they're doing very serious work and getting very critical directions. So that's always been my passion in doing, is really trying to, you know, allow people who happen to do ballet, right, at a professional or pre-professional level, to remember that they're people, and how to really take care of themselves in that regard. So.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, perfectionism is such a major issue for dancers, and it can be both good and bad, which I'm sure, you know, Brian's going to talk with us about, and Shelby as well. But I think, you know, I recently wrote an article for Dance Magazine that I interviewed Shelby for, where I spoke with Dr. Sana Norden-Bates, who is a psychology researcher who's doing a lot of research around perfectionism in dancers. And I mean, you know, there are a lot of implications to it. Definitely the root of a lot of the eating disorder issues we see in dance. So, you know, I think it's a really important topic. And I think right now, while the world feels very much turned on its head and dancers are not in their normal space, right, able to move their bodies the way they do normally, and dealing, you know, with a crisis the way every other human being on the planet right now is, I think this becomes even more important. So Brian, if you would, could we start a little bit, like, let's just talk about perfectionism in dancers, and how you see it manifest, you know, how it may be helpful or harmful to their success and well-being.
Yeah. I think first and foremost, and one of the things you have to realize about dancers is if you're going to get good and you don't have perfectionism in you, you're probably not going to get good. dancers and the ballet really is very different from pretty much any other sport, in that it doesn't make a difference what you look like when you're dunking a basketball. As long as that big spherical object goes through that round hole, you're good. You'd never see a basketball player get called out because his arm wasn't extended properly as the ball went through. And that's very different when it comes to the ballet. It is about execution and about the aesthetics. So you have to kind of come by that naturally. And I think, and I would venture to say pretty much all ballet dancers have some degree of perfectionism in order to make it. Unfortunately, as you know, it's a double-edged sword, because perfectionism is really more about how you're executing rather than who you are. And perfectionists tend to wind up taking it very personally, like it's who I am. And you have to kind of fall in love with any sport like that. You've got to fall in love with the quest for it'll never be perfect. And so it's really trying to help you shift between, yes, I'm going to try to make it perfect, but I'm also falling in love with the fact that it'll never be perfect. Right? So, and it's just wrestling with all the different thoughts and circumstances that go on for dancers as they're moving through that shift.
Absolutely. I very often describe perfectionism as it's like the horizon, right? It recedes as you approach it. You never arrive. You never touch the sunset or find the Lucky Charms at the end of the rainbow or whatever, right? It's just not there. So Shelby, would you mind talking a little bit about your own, you've talked a little bit about it, but your own kind of journey with perfectionism, and kind of how you try to manage that as a professional?
Yeah. So I think the first time I realized that being such a perfectionist could be a negative thing, because all through my childhood, it caused me to get, straight A's through school, and, it facilitated a lot of things that were always positive outcomes. And then it wasn't until when I was at Houston Ballet Academy and I was training, it's like any professional school, you go there as probably coming from being one of the strongest dancers in your hometown, and then suddenly you're surrounded by all these very, very talented people, and it's only natural that you compare yourself of, okay, where do I fall in this? What are my chances of getting into the company eventually? What does this mean for me, for my future? And when I would first go to summer intensives, I was always very excited. And I don't think when I was in just a short-term thing like a summer intensive, there wasn't too much anxiety around it, because it was also exciting and there was a challenge and I was learning so many things and I was seeing so many people that I want to aspire to be like. And it wasn't until I kind of got to be around 16 that it's getting closer to that moment where you have to actually get a job. And then I was in a full-time school year round. And then I started seeing these people not as my friends at a summer intensive. They were, of course, still my friends, but it suddenly felt much more like my competition, but in a negative way, that I was comparing myself way too much. And I would get this feeling sometimes in class that I was comparing myself so much to the people around me, I would get very distracted, and I realized I wasn't actually performing very well, because all of my mental energy was going towards quick back and forth comparison of seeing myself in the mirror, seeing someone else. And it was quite exhausting. And then one day in class, we were doing adagio. Adagio has never been my strong suit. And I had this feeling like it kind of manifests itself in your body when you have something like an anxiety attack. And I started having a hard time breathing, and my muscles, like everything felt really heavy and really tense. And I was seeing people around me, and I was seeing how my legs were so much lower. And then I kind of just started hyperventilating, and I started crying. And my teacher was, of course, caught off guard, because we were just doing adagio, and she didn't even say anything to me. It was just during adagio. And so she said, like, yeah, why don't you go outside and get some water, come back if you feel ready. If not, you know, take your time. And then she mentioned it to the director of the school at the time. And then she was the one who actually referred me to Dr. Goonan and said, maybe it's worth talking to someone if you're having a lot of stress or anxiety that you don't know how to deal with. And then through talking with him, I learned a lot about exactly what he was saying. Is I had never separated ballet and the corrections and everything from my identity. From the moment I decided I wanted to be a professional dancer, that was me. It was one thing. There's one unit. There's no Shelby, the person, and then if ballet isn't going well, Shelby can still do well. That, for me, that concept didn't exist. And so then, like, one of the things that really stuck with me was this analogy he did of comparing ballet to golf, and how golf is also about perfection, like a hole in one. It's very clear what you want to get, but golfers aren't, the best pro golfers aren't going in and just, you know, hitting hole in one, hole in one, hole in one. And it kind of reminded me, oh yeah, like the reason I like dancing is not because I'm going to come out perfect every time. It's because of the things I can learn through the process, the challenge it gives me. And so that really helped me kind of have a different perspective. But of course, it still took like several more years into my career, I think, also to build up confidence. The beginning of your career is always a very shaky time. A lot of times you're a trainee or you're an apprentice and you don't know, again, like still into your early 20s, am I going to get that next contract? Will I be renewed? Do I have the stability that I can be confident in my work, or should I be constantly questioning myself? But keeping that in mind, that it was like I should be enjoying it. And if I'm not enjoying it, for example, if I'm in a company, I'm in a situation where maybe dance-wise I don't fit in there. I like the idea of the company, but for my skill set, it's not the best fit. And I found that I was unhappy. I didn't beat myself up. I was like, oh, okay, it's not a fit. It's not that I'm bad. It's not a rejection or a failure. It's, you know, you have to find what suits you and listen to, what do I want? And if I'm listening and I'm not happy, this is probably not what I want, even though it's the idea of what I wanted. So I kind of moved around companies. And then when I got to a company that was a mix of, we still did ballet class every morning. We used pointe shoes. It was like neoclassical work. And then also contemporary. I realized, oh, this is what I like. Because me personally as a dancer, I don't have all these really natural lines. I don't have fantastic feet. I don't have hyperextended legs and high extension, but I've always been very athletic, and that works very well with a lot of contemporary work. And so then, like, kind of through discovering that, realizing, oh, I can prioritize like my happiness. Mm-hmm. I don't have to fulfill the idea of what is a ballerina and what company, like what name do I want to go for, the biggest company with the biggest name, because that's a proof of achievement. And through that, I went through some smaller companies, and then I ended up here in Royal Ballet of Flanders. That was kind of a dream company for a while, and I never thought my path would bring me there. So it's definitely, it's not like I went to see someone and I spoke to them and, you know, 2 months later I was feeling better. It was definitely something that progressed over several years from my training period into my career and throughout my career. Yeah.
And that's, if I may, I know we've not been in contact over the years.
Yeah.
But all I can do is say yes. Right? And that's exactly what it is. I mean, for the longest time, I think what perfectionists try to do is they're like, I can be a dancer at any company, right? I can mold myself to fit what the company needs, right? Because I'm a perfectionist and I can do anything, right? And the shift in that, as you were describing your story, the shift in that is, no, wait a minute. There are things that are in my wheelhouse and things that I absolutely love and enjoy doing. Rather than me fitting the company, let me find the company that fits me.
Yeah.
So I can continue to be passionate about what I'm doing, which is why I did dance in the first place, not to be, you know, the absolute best. Yeah, that's great. But I did it because it's fun, right? Dance is really supposed to be this fun, passionate thing that you get to do. and at y'all's level, and you get to do exceedingly well, which is a bonus, right?
Yeah.
So yay, go
Yeah.
for it. Go for it.
Yeah, and it's something that I really try to share with friends as much as I can, or especially with younger dancers that I meet, is the whole thing of, just because maybe at one point it was your dream to work somewhere, don't feel like if it's not a natural fit, you have to force it.
Yeah.
It's okay to pick something else, and that's not a failure. Taking another path isn't, people think that it's the only reason you ever take another path is because you couldn't make it on one. And that's not true. You can take another path because in the end, it's a better path.
Yeah.
And so just kind of changing that mentality of it's not a failure to change your mind. It's not a failure to change your path and find what really suits you and then what really makes you happy. And as long as it makes you happy, it doesn't matter if your parents expected you to do something, or you told all your friends you were going to do it, and then you were like, actually, in the end, no, that's not the route I'm going this way. And getting rid of the external pressure attached to it of expectation from other people. Remembering to kind of be selfish, prioritize yourself. Mm-hmm. What other people want doesn't matter. What they want in their life, that's great, but it's your life.
Yeah. I'm sorry, guys.
Oh no, it's fine. I was just gonna say, as the the person in the conversation who was a dancer and chose to leave dance, that's also true in that choice. And it's true in all things, really. But I think what's beautiful about your story, Shelby, is the way that the authenticity with which you sought your place, right? And the way that kind of naturally brought you to fulfill a dream, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, that's very cool, because you weren't just jamming yourself in there.
Yeah.
So as I was sitting here, and I just thought about this fun acronym as you're thinking about moving through your career and finding your space, finding your place. I mm-hmm. thought about because you're in Europe. I thought about fiat, right? So let it be fun, right? It needs to match. The place that you pick has to match what's going to be fun for you, what's going to have the level of intensity you want, what's going to have the type of artistry you enjoy, and is going to fit well for the technique that you're good at, right? So
Brian always has an acronym. You always have an acronym. It's amazing.
They're good.
But it sounds like you found just that. So, yay!
So I would love to, like, in the context in which we're currently living, Brian, are there issues related to perfectionism that maybe give you a little bit more concern or pause, given the fact that we're in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic and the dancers are shuttered away?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest one is, there's kind of two major things, really, right? One is the absolute shift, especially for folks that are in academies or in dance companies, that you've got this absolute shift from having your entire day structured and every minute of it filled, because everybody's always working on something and they always want to work on some different piece, or you're just basically going through, and you're not running an 8-hour day, you're running a 12, maybe even 16-hour day, and now you've got nothing. You've got 0 hours. You could sleep till noon if you wanted to, and then go to bed at 2 p.m., not even a.m. if you wanted to. Like, there's no thing to do. And so what do you do with all that time? And so that shift is also oftentimes kind of this mental, like, I should be doing something, which plays out especially for perfectionists, because if I'm not doing something, then I'm falling behind, then somebody else is getting ahead. And so that's piece number one, like I'm being a slacker, I'm not doing enough. And then piece number two is the unfortunate solution that many people will have, right? And that could go in direction A, where they'll just start getting depressed and not do anything, or direction B, where they will now begin to hyper train in a variety of ways that seem to make absolutely no sense with almost no plan, right? Why? Because they've got, 20,000 different Instagram feeds and, or, links and Facebook pages and whatever. And everybody's going to have their opinion about what you should be doing in this downtime, right? So they won't really engage anything in a deliberate, persistent sort of way. They'll just be kind of randomly doing stuff. And so I think that's the issue, and perhaps even overdoing stuff, doing more than they should. And so I think if they can get hold of somebody who is, perhaps from their academy, from their, from the company, who can say, here are the things that you need to be doing during the day to maintain your athleticism, to maintain your artistry, and not just randomly going about it. But athletes are really funny that way. We know people who get injured. One of the things that we have to fight the most with athletes who get injured is them doing stealth training. The physical therapist will say, here's what I want you to be doing, and here's only what I want you to be doing. I don't want you to be doing anything other than that. And they'll be doing stealth training, right? I know swimmers that will find local pools that are unlocked that they can get into so that they can swim more than they were told to swim. So then, there's a lot of training you can do in ballet in your living room. You don't have to find some unlocked swimming pool, right? You can do it right in your living room, and you can totally overdo it in your living room. So that's kind of the difficulty that I see.
Yeah, I mean, Brian, you're spot on. I mean, Shelby, I don't know. I feel like there's probably 50 to 100 live streaming dance classes happening right this second.
So many. The thing is, there's so many, and then there's also it's the whole guilt thing of feeling like I should be doing something. I should be checking this out. I should be, well, if I was in a normal working situation right now, if my company wasn't closed down because of this, I would be doing class every day. And then on top of that, I would have 6 hours rehearsal. So the fact that I'm too lazy to even get up and do one class one day, what does that say about me? Like, that definitely plays through my head sometimes. But the first kind of 5 days of when we had here in Belgium this lockdown quarantine, I took it like a Sunday. I was like, okay, it's my time to rest. And then on day 5, I was like, okay, 5 days of Sunday. Yeah, maybe it's time to do something. And so I sought out, because I know it's all the dancers are feeling like this. I had so many people write me. It's frustrating trying to train in your house. It's frustrating having a kitchen counter as your bar, which is lower than a real bar, or having a floor that's so slippery, or having such a hard concrete floor below you that it doesn't feel good on the body. You're hitting things, maybe you don't have the right amount of space, and people with good intentions trying to be proactive. And I know a lot of people are training regularly because they say, I don't want to get injured when I come back, because I went from absolutely nothing to like a work schedule again for who knows how many weeks. But that the frustration that can come from coping with the environment that you're kind of forcing yourself to train in really takes away from any motivation. And I found that the first couple times I started doing class, I was just doing my own thing, just feeling kind of what my body needed. And then I really realized, okay, I like being motivated. I like someone pushing me, and it's very difficult. Although I'm a highly motivated person, I do have my limit. My self-motivation runs out if I don't have some sort of interaction with someone. So then I started doing, following the class of a friend of mine, because it was different than if it's someone like a teacher I never knew, and if they're live streaming, it's kind of a stranger just talking, and it's not really personal. Where I had an ex-colleague who was giving class, and I felt like I know him, and so when he's teaching class, it's like he's talking to me, because there's that personal connection. And I found for me, that was really helpful, because it felt like human contact. Initially, he did through Instagram, and now he's doing through Zoom. So he can see you, you can see him, and there's the interaction. And that I found has been very helpful in having a class that doesn't feel like work. It feels like a nice moment that I get to see someone familiar, even though I'm isolated. There's a little bit of human contact with someone that's like a friendly face. And also, I pick out taking his class. He offers it 3 times a week. I don't feel guilty about not doing class every day because he's not giving class every day. So I don't have to take class every day. I don't have to apologize about missing class. So I go maybe 2 or 3 times a week and I stay home. I stay home and I do class 2 or 3 times a week with him. And also the way he teaches class, I really had to think about what do I like in a class, because I'm not here training for any specific production. I don't need anything right now for my body. So what do I want? What makes me happy? And I really like the way he teaches class because it's not about positions and lines and things. It's really about sensations, and he very much has an approach, like non-perfection approach, and about finding things, and everything's an exploration. And so it's fun because he's constantly giving things to think about and things to kind of discover, but without any expectation attached to it. And I think I'm not gonna take, there's so many classes out there, but I was like, I'm not gonna take anyone else's class because I'm enjoying his class. It always leaves me in a good mood, and it's a few times a week. It keeps me in shape. And then I do other things with my free time. And I found that since that, with quarantine, I don't have any anxiety about training and things. And I know for everyone it's different. And I'm actually quite surprised at how relaxed I am about not dancing every day and not training. But I think it's just I got lucky that I happened to take class from a friend who his class suits me. The fact that I see someone I know comforts me. And it's kind of like an accumulation of things that makes this fine for me.
Makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
That plan for an approach, right?
Yeah.
So I plan to do it. So.
Yeah. And then to kind of fill the rest of the time, because I don't feel good. There's days where I'm like, oh yeah, I just want to sit on my couch and watch Netflix all day. And that's also fine. But I know it kind of goes back to, I know, like, what do I like about dancing? And I like the kind of athletic, challenging aerobic things. And you can't really do that with a lot of streamed classes. Most of them are bars, and then maybe a couple combinations after bars. So it never really gets to the part of dancing that I like the most. And a friend of mine who's not a dancer invited me to join him for a streamed, like, Zoom CrossFit class. I never thought in my life I would try CrossFit because I was like, those people are insane. I'm going to hurt myself, and then I'm going to have problems at work. But since it's all at home and, you do with your own body weight and whatever you have around the house, it felt much safer. And I was like, yeah, I'll give it a shot. And in the end, in those classes, we always do different exercises I never learned before. So I'm learning new things, and it's with a totally different group of people. None of these people are dance people. And so it's also really nice to see a sort of community not related to dance, of these other people trying to come together and like, oh, let's have some sort of social engaged interaction where we're also moving our bodies because it's also good for your physical health. And so also just having that slightly different change of atmosphere because of that. I like it, the balance of I take dance some days, and then some days I'll take this CrossFit class with my friend, and it gives me a little bit of a schedule because they have a schedule of when their classes are. And so it's not like I'm just floating in these never-ending days where time is an illusion, and I can wake up at 1 PM and go to bed at 4 AM, which I definitely did the first few days because I was like, oh, time zone difference doesn't matter, I can stay up and talk to family all night. Which was great. But then I missed the sun, and then I was like, okay, find a rhythm that makes me feel good. And having some classes that I know regularly, I'm gonna, every Wednesday and Friday I want to take that CrossFit class. It helps me keep track of what day of the week it is, for one. And then it also gives me some comfort to have some sort of rhythm to my life, like a reason to wake up by a certain time.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, so I think, Shelby, you tapped into a couple things in that that I'd love to dig into a little bit more. I mean, so I think the first and kind of one that a lot of dancers are dealing with, especially with perfectionism, is, you know, to your point, like you're holding a kitchen counter that's not the right height, and you're on, if you're lucky, a wood floor, right? And you're slipping around and you just kicked the cabinet, and it's that's incredibly frustrating. And, you know, I can imagine that through that, you're like, you know, my leg's not as high as it should be, or it's not as high as it was, or, you know, like, you know, I'm wondering, Brian, if you have any thoughts on kind of the way that you need to manage, like, kind of the standard you're holding yourself to right now. Yeah.
Well, you know, it's difficult because a lot of times, I mean, there's a reality behind why a bar is a certain height, right? And what it does and what it allows you to do physiologically, right? And so there is that reality, but part of it is shifting for the fact that we're not in that reality right now, right? And Shelby was saying, it's not like you're training for some production. And, you know, if you're working on, say, flexibility, there are many ways other than a bar to gain flexibility, right? What else can I do? You can make modifications to it. But the hard part is you have to remember that all you're trying to do is stay roughly in shape, roughly ready, so that you're not going from 0 to 100 when you get back. And so again, it's that whole notion of perspective. You know, what am I doing and what am I really trying to accomplish here, right? I think the good dance companies, you know, the good academies, they're not going to come back and hit you at 100 miles an hour the first day back. They're going to take, and they're going to have to take, you know, easily a month and a half just to get people back to the level of rigor that they used to have. You just can't, you can't take people who have been at home doing this stuff. And hopefully they'll do that. I think there'll always be those perfectionist instructors and masters out there that are going to, you know, shine favor on the people who seem to have lost absolutely no ground. I would say, you know, let that be their shtick. Don't let it be yours. You know, as long as you kept up reasonably well, then I think that's what it is. But it really is a challenge to give yourself just a little bit of leniency as long as you're heading in the right direction.
I just want to add to what he was saying about, you know, no, you know, kind of reputable academy or company would rush their dancers into something because, you know, it's going to cause injury. It's not the way to approach it. But also another point that has really helped keep any anxiety I probably could have had at bay is the fact that with the way this virus is, there will definitely be time after we're allowed back in the studio before they will allow hundreds of people to gather in a theater. It's not like we're going to be in the studio one day and then, okay, 2 days later, people are also allowed in the theater. We're going to make up for lost shows. It's just, we got to be realistic. It's not going to happen. And in many ways, keeping that in mind, that it's helping me not to put expectation of I have to be performance ready within a week or 2 weeks of getting back to work. Like, no, I will have a month, 2 months, who knows? And that's plenty of time to get back to where I need to be performing. So yeah, knowing that the audience isn't waiting at the theater for you the day we get back from quarantine.
Yeah. Shelby, that's such a good point. One I definitely had not thought of. So it's really good advice for the dancers to keep in mind.
Yeah, it really helps calm me down sometimes. I'm like, oh man, it's going to be so much work to pick back up things, but no, we'll have our time. Mm-hmm. It's like out of our control, which is kind of a silver lining, blessing that this has to go slow. The way that this kind of health crisis is, if they rush anything, it could have a detrimental impact on a lot of people. So everything will be taken slow. So we shouldn't not allow ourselves to go slow as well. We can go slow. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And the other thing that you keyed into in when you were speaking earlier, Shelby, that I'd love for us to dig into a little bit more is this idea of doing things outside of dance. And we kind of, I think at the beginning of this conversation, we talked about how that kind of perfectionism really is tied to identity in a lot of ways. And Brian's going to correct me and say all this correctly, because I don't have a PhD, but, but, this idea that your perfectionism and your identity are intertwined and tethered to one another. So it seemed logical to me that this is a really wonderful opportunity to expand that identity a little bit, right? Kicking that to you, Brian.
For sure. And there's a variety of different things. So one of the things that we know is, and this perhaps is maybe for some of the younger dancers rather than the professional, the older dancers, is that youths that engage in a singular sport have 50% greater injuries than youths that engage in multiple sports. And it's because they keep using the same muscles, the same ligaments, the same tendons, the same way over and over again, and they're not using a variety of things for their development, right? So I'm a big believer in doing kind of that cross training, doing a variety of different sports, and not having, when I work with youth, and by that I mean, say 12 to 16 or 17, right? Telling them that, no, I don't want you just throwing baseballs. I want you kicking soccer balls and riding bikes and climbing trees and doing all that other fun stuff, moving your body in many, many different ways. It actually decreases the likelihood that you're going to get an injury. And parents are just shocked about that. But, the Orthopedic Society is not lying about it. They just track it. So that's one thing. But then the other thing, too, is really expanding that identity, right? So I am not just a dancer, right? I'm also now actually apparently a CrossFit person, right? So that's that. And I never thought I'd be one of those people, right? However you want to stereotype those people. I'm also a tree climber, or I'm a cyclist, or I'm a cook, or, it's one of the things that we talk about is when people go into professional dance, the reason that, and I don't have like screens and stuff to do this, but the reason that you get lost is that one sliver of your identity, that one sliver of who am I, that 1/8 of who am I becomes like 7/8 of who you are. And so if anything goes wrong, you lose like 87% of yourself. That's no bueno, right? We've really got to have something else. And so when you think about, dance is really supposed to be about your artistic, creative expression, right? And exploration. And when you take it to the professional level, now it's also your career, and it's also your finances, it's also where all your friends are, and it just envelops too much of your identity. And so if you learn how to cook or sew or climb trees or, whatever, and you become good at that kind of artistry, play an instrument, write books, do whatever it is you want to do, that you have that other outlet for artistic expression, it really gives you more of a breadth of identity so that it's not sunk into one position, right? And it's just so crucial. And that's what we find is that, if you put all of your, it's all of the eggs in one basket maneuver. You wind up getting really, really nervous if there's any threat to that basket. Hypervigilant almost. So yeah.
Something that I found really interesting, I was talking to a friend of mine who works here in the company with me just at the beginning of all of this, and we were kind of talking about our concerns of what will this mean for us as dancers, what will this mean for the company, what will this mean for our colleagues also, how will people handle it? And she said, because she has a thing that she's had many injuries, she's kind of injury prone because of, a little bit more hypermobility than most people. And so she's had times where she's been off for 3 months or a month and a half or 5 months at a time. And she said, I think I'm better prepared to cope with this because I've had time where dance was taken away from me and I was by myself while everyone else was at work, and I had to figure out, what do I do with my time? what other interests do I have? Because I'm in a brace right now and I literally cannot dance. How do I want to fill my time? And she paints and she likes to do video editing. Like, she's found all these other things. And so, and I hadn't, until she said that, I hadn't thought about it. Like, oh, this is quite similar to when dancers have injuries, and the same kind of psychological approach of, okay, what is the rest of me? If this part does not fill up my entire day, what is the rest of my identity? What is the rest of other interests that can also bring me joy? And yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Shelby, I think you're so right. And something that I experience having the opportunity to interview dancers all the time, and inevitably a discussion with a dancer will often include discussion of their injuries, right? And the experiences they had during their injuries. And what I find over and over again is that the dancers with more kind of full identities as human beings, right? And the dancers that kind of have an idea of what's next, or something that helps fill them in addition to dance. They're often dancers who have sustained long-term injuries. Just like you're saying, they're people that have had to invest in that. I mean, I know for myself personally, you know, I started writing when I became injured because I didn't know what else to do. So I just started keeping a journal, and that was like my comfort. And I had no idea like that was going to be the next chapter of my life as a writer, you know. But when I did stop dancing, it was like, well, what else makes me happy? And it was like, well, I guess writing does. And, you know, here I am, you know. So it's interesting. And I think the dance world is collectively injured right now, right?
Mm.
Like everybody's at home with an ice bucket right now. And that is a uniquely difficult situation for any dancer to sustain, but we're also doing it collectively, and there's something to that. So I guess, are there any other things, Brian, that you think of, you know, that the dancers can do in this time to help come back mentally stronger, right? Because the absence of that physical part of dance is an opportunity really for developing other strengths.
Yeah. I think, you know, one of the things, there's a chat box. Somebody's trying to chat with us.
Oh, yeah.
But I think one of the things that I like to do with folks in terms of really centering and actually in dance case or in athlete's case, you know, widening their identity is making a list for themselves, let's say a dozen items that answer the following question. I am a person who, fill in the blank, right? And so, you know, I am a person who dances. Okay, great. What do you want the other 11 to be about? Because if that's really all you got in there, you have to have a discussion, right? And so I'm a person who takes care of my friends. Okay, fantastic. How are you doing that? Because that doesn't involve dance at all, right? I'm a person who enjoys being with animals. Okay, fantastic. How are you doing that? Right? And that's how we really, you know, kind of, spread our identity into many different areas so that we have greater health. And so if you can come up with a dozen of those things, you know, for any dancers in this time, I would say, just come up with that list, post it on your mirror, post it on your refrigerator, and then see, am I really being that person, right? What did I do today that answers number 7, right? What did I do today that really affirms, number 11? And, you know, to really try to form that solid base so that your behavior matches what you believe about yourself and or what you want to be true about yourself. So that's what I would say to do at this time.
I was also just thinking, kind of tied into like how do you expand yourself as a person, is actually such a silver lining to this very dark cloud. Is dancers, everyone has time to try something else. And now's the moment. And also because everyone is quarantining, there's so many things online that if you are a timid person and you would be too intimidated to go in and join a class for like pottery making or like anything random, and you feel like I am completely clueless, I don't want to show up as this really naive person to some class of something I've never tried before. There's so many online things now you can follow at home, you can try at home. And if it goes wrong, like no one saw it other than your cat, like it's fine. And if it goes great, or if it's something that sparks a lot of interest, then it's a great way, I think, of kind of opening up things. I was telling like the other panelists before we started, my kitchen has been in a very long renovation that's taken longer than it should have, just because of my performance schedule and me trying to get contractors to come in and out. And so then when this started and I still didn't have upper cabinets done, I needed to have custom made for specific reasons. I just thought, like, yeah, I got free time, so I'm going to learn woodworking on YouTube. And I did. And it's turned out pretty fine so far, and I'm really enjoying it. And actually something I never thought of. It was, I started doing it out of a practical sense of, I don't want to stare at this unfinished kitchen for any longer, and I'm here all day. So I want to get this done. But actually woodworking is kind of a creative process. You get to design and make it how you want, and then find creative solutions. And on top of that, it kind of taps into my perfectionism of all the measurements have to be exactly right. Otherwise it's a little wonky. So yeah, I think taking advantage of this, that like you said, like we're kind of all collectively injured. There's not the guilt. You're not missing out on anything because everyone's missing out. It's just not possible now. So embrace it and kind of take that chance to explore different things, and there's no guilt tied to it.
Such amazing advice, Shelby. I totally agree with you. And I think, listening to you speak, first of all, I love that, like, you can do your own cabinets now, like what an accomplishment. But what you said about like the fear of not doing something well, right? And I think that this is something that we as perfectionists do to ourselves, right? Because especially when you've dedicated your life, right, to something like dance, and you've been doing it for 20 years plus, whatever, and you're, quote, an expert, right? Your 10,000 hours are in, to like pick something else up and not be very good at it is
it's embarrassing.
Awful.
You're like, I'm so accomplished in one thing and I'm completely clueless in another. Yeah. It's embarrassing. Yeah, I'm intimidated to go. Maybe this is also why I've never gone to do CrossFit in person. I'm just intimidated by those people. And now, like, actually my first lesson, it was on Zoom, and I left my camera off. I was like, I'm just gonna follow along on my own. And my friend called me out to the instructor halfway through class and said, yeah, I have a friend who came, but she left her camera off. And then I had to turn it on, and it was so embarrassing. But the teacher was super nice, and he was saying, we're here to support each other, and if I can see you, I can correct you and make sure you're doing it well. And we also motivate each other by seeing everyone's trying their best. And like, it was exactly the right person that could make me comfortable in such a situation. But yeah, it ties into that, like as perfectionists, scared to try new things, because what if you're not good at it? Well, then plenty of room to grow, like plenty of things to kind of consume your energy and time and keep you engaged, I guess. It would be boring if you were really good right off the bat.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's kind of the opposite of perfectionism, right? A little bit of humility.
Embrace those biscuits.
Yeah, exactly.
Excellent. So I think my kind of last question before we kind of round this thing out, Brian, I know you and I have had conversations in the past about, dancers' concerns with plateauing, right? And I think this ties into perfectionism in a really big way. And it also, I think, ties into what's happening right now, because it's like brakes are on, like you're struggling to maintain, let alone to excel. So can you talk a little bit about that, about that feeling of plateau and how they can deal with that?
Yeah. The hardest part to it is accepting the fact that our brain can really only accept, and our body can really only accept so much information and integrate so much information before it kind of needs consolidation time, right? So, and it's not only from the physical standpoint. So in athletic training, they talk about periodicity of training, where you have times of intense training and followed by times of being off, so that your body can rest. But it's also so that your body can kind of consolidate what it's doing. And what happens when we hit our plateau really is our brain's trying to wire everything, or our body's trying to wire everything so that it can become more efficient and or more creative from that, kind of balanced stance, right? And, you know, a lot of people get upset with that because they're used to just, you know, having this constant up plane. And so, you know, again, it's just this notion of, no, this is actually kind of a good thing. What my body's doing and my brain is doing is trying to figure out how do I consolidate everything so I can be more efficient, right? More creative, and actually move to the next level. I have to accept that I'm here at this plateau. And it will pass, and the fall plateaus pass, right? But it's a hard thing for the perfectionist who just wants that constant up to accept.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, absolutely. So I think, so that I can kind of keep us on time here, first, I want to thank Brian and Shelby. I was like deeply honored that you trusted me enough to come on this little journey with me the first time we're doing this. And I appreciate you both so much for the work that you do. And you're both a great inspiration to me. So thank you. It really meant a lot to me. And I think so. One kind of like, hang on, I'm going to check this real quick because I think I've got my little Q&A box isn't coming up. So whatever that Q&A in there is, I promise I will look at it as soon as I figure that out.
Oh, you want me to read it? I opened it.
Yep, I've got it. Go ahead.
The first one, it's how can dancers cope with the food guilt that might come from eating and not exercising as much?
I think that's a great question. And I think it's going to warrant its own additional episode, to be totally honest with you. I'm going to let Brian chime in a little bit there. But just so everyone knows, my commitment to the dance community is to do one of these every 2 weeks for at least the next 3 months. And each one will have a slightly different topic. And certainly the issues around food are going to be one of those. But Brian, do you want to say a couple words about it?
Kind of. I mean, just kind of quickly about it, we talk about food guilt from eating and not exercising as much. One of the things you have to be careful about is whether or not you've been using exercise to balance out your calories, right? It's kind of a form of eating disorder where, I always make sure that I have enough exercise to eliminate all my calories, as opposed to, I make sure that I put adequate calories in my body for the exercise that I'm going to do, right? Dancers who are in the studio for umpteen bajillion hours a day can ingest, ginormous quantities of calories because they're burning off so much, right? Obviously, you have to have the right balances, right? And that's where nutritionists and dietitians come in, things like that, so, outside the field. But that's what I would say is, you have to kind of look at why is the food guilt, quote unquote food guilt there, and what's that really about? Are you eating properly, or are you trying to use the exercise to burn off the calories you're ingesting? That's one of the questions. It's a question that deserves more exploration, but that would be one of the pieces there.
Yeah, definitely. It will definitely be one of the primary topics of one of these town halls. And when we do have that discussion, I'm going to make sure I have both a mental health professional and a nutritionist on deck for that conversation, because it really is multifaceted and requires that level of attention. Mm-hmm. But it's an excellent question. Are there other things there, Shelby, that you think?
Yes. Someone said, "Hi, thanks for the great webinar. May I ask about perfectionism and approaching the end of a career? Wanting to be perfect is not aligned with recognizing it's time to stop. Can we talk about that?"
I think that, this is going to force the end of some careers, right? Like this is going to be, I've spoken with dancers who were supposed to have their farewell performance this season, and it's just done. It's gone, right? That's really hard. I think same for some students who, maybe aren't going to continue into a professional career, and they were about to have their senior showcase and dance the big role and have their big moment. So I think it's a super valid question. I don't know, Brian, do you have thoughts that you want to bring into that?
Yeah, I'm trying to find it. Pardon me for looking really fast online.
It's fine. And Shelby, if you have something, feel free to chime in as well.
This just makes me think of how we kind of referred to dancers who had an idea of what they were going to do when they finished, and tying that into dancers who had an injury. And it was all linked to people who had found their other interests. And I think the perfectionism and having dance be something that you work towards your entire career, it's so devastating. It is a loss at the end that it's a passion that, for physical reasons for many times, or for other reasons, it's time to stop dancing. And I think, you know, I always see with colleagues of mine, ones who are getting close to retirement, you see a very distinct difference between the ones who had kind of a whole life of friends not associated with work, just because they're going to be retiring or they're going to stop training in ballet. Not all of their friends are at the school, or not all of their friends are in the company, that when they leave dance, they've also lost all of their social ties, that all of a sudden all of their friends are together all the time and they're excluded. I think that social aspect is very difficult for a lot of colleagues of mine that I've seen. And the ones who do have friends with normal jobs outside, they certainly cope much better. And then I think that ties into other interests, other activities that can also spark ideas, like it did for you, Kathleen, with writing. Yeah. What do I want to do? That also kind of helps soften the blow. But I think for anyone, it's going to be sad. It is a loss, because obviously we start for a reason. There is something we're very attached to about dance, and it's why we put in so much work, and it's why we become so obsessed with it, instead of just getting fed up with it and saying at first try, like, oh yeah, it's too many rules, I don't want to do that. There's something we love about it that makes us approach it. But having that like full web of other interests, other friends, other social circles, and activities in our life definitely softens the blow.
I kind of found the thing that I was looking for, but not exactly. So, you know, because of the time constraints. But there's something out there called the Scanlon Collaborative Interview. And it's one of the things that has been done with a variety of different athletes in looking at their careers. And you look at the career, what it brings to you, what it takes from you, a variety of different areas in terms of how do you decide when it's time to retire, right? Wow. So incredibly helpful. It explores a variety of different areas. I was introduced to it at a sports psychology conference that they'd done it with the All Blacks, which is, you know, when you think about, you know, psych techniques and things like that. To the All Blacks is the New Zealand rugby team, national rugby team. Great bunch of guys. You know, rugby players who still, you know, but just really grounded psychologically, you know, set for where they are, which is probably why they're so successful at what they do. But they all have that as one of the things that they do as they're approaching kind of, you know, different stages in their careers to figure out, is it time? You know, am I ready?
Hey, Brian, can you, that survey you're discussing, can you spell what it is?
That's Scanlon is SCANLON. So let me say that again, because I think I doubled some things. S, right? SCANLON. Scanlon.
Scanlon interview?
I think it's called the Scanlon Collaborative Interview.
Got it.
And so it's one of the ways that, you know, you help professional athletes figure out, you know, where am I and am I ready to retire, so that they make a much more successful transition into retirement.
Great. So, you know, I feel bad, guys. I know that there are more questions coming up. Shelby, is there one you look like you're jumping for?
Oh, there was just a quick one that someone was asking what CrossFit class I'm taking.
Answer that.
Yeah, I'm actually taking a class from a studio in Madrid because I learned Spanish in school, but I don't use it that often. And my friend lives in Madrid. And so I figured, you know, I live in Belgium. I don't get to practice Spanish that often. So I'm following their Spanish class. It's called Wild River CrossFit. And their Instagram, they post their workouts every day of what they're going to do. So I kind of pick what looks fun and if I'm going to join in that day. But yeah, if you speak Spanish, they're very nice.
Excellent. Well, so I know that there are other questions we're not getting to, and I do apologize for that, but I will commit to everybody viewing right now that I will follow up with Brian and Shelby and get you some answers and send out an email after the fact. We will have a video recording. As long as I haven't flubbed the technology, we will have a video recording of this, and I will, when I send out that link, I will also send out answers to your further questions, because I really appreciate the engagement, and of course I think all three of us could probably sit here and talk about this all day long, because we're nerds.
Nerdy. Sure, why not?
Yeah, exactly. And thank you. I'm getting some really sweet little comments, so thank you. So the last thing that I want to put out there, I'm going to attempt to share my screen, and here we go. Okay. Oh, that's not what I needed. Doesn't want to work. There we go. Okay. So this is how you can get in touch with each of us. The last thing that I'd like to say to everyone is just that, I interview a lot of dancers. I've done hundreds of interviews with dancers, and I can tell you that I have the same portion of an interview almost every time I talk to a dancer. And that is when I ask them how they got where they are. And it always begins with how they started dancing. And I'm here to tell you that you all started dancing for joy. You all started dancing because you loved it, just as Brian pointed out earlier. And with the opportunity to take all of these classes and to be worried about, your arabesque and all of these things, like, this really is a unique opportunity to just dance for joy. Just, it's important to keep moving, but let's all do it for the right reason. And that is for the joy. You're sad and you miss this because you love it. And so I have asked Shelby, I think at the end of each of these, I'm going to ask the dancer guest to choose our Dance for Joy song. And we are going to exit on a high note with something, get up if you want to, and know that there are people all over the world dancing like a fool with you. Love you guys. Thank you so much to my panelists for their incredibly thoughtful discussion. And we'll be doing this again soon. So Shelby, do you want to give this a shot and see if it works?
Yeah. So the song I picked is Hooked on a Feeling. So we're just going to have a little dance party to Hooked on a Feeling.